What should employers and open-minded employees even be doing? Jimmy McLoughlin was a special advisor in Number 10 to Theresa May, and he now podcasts about the future of work on Jimmy's Jobs. Let's hear from him. Jimmy, welcome. Do you think that, I'm not talking specifically about Theresa May or any particular party, but do you think the political class has realised the scale of disruption that is about to hit us?
No, I don't think it has, but I think it is beginning to realise this week, and we are beginning to see those essays that you mentioned. But I had Keir Starmer and Peter Carl, who was the technology secretary, on my podcast, Jimmy's Jobs of the Future, last year, and I asked them when they thought AGI might be here, and they both agreed that it might be here by the time of the next general election. And I just don't think that Westminster has realised the kind of economic scale and how it may fundamentally change our economy, may change our entire tax base if we do have the levels of unemployment that people are talking about. It is going to be a huge transitional change for the economy, and it may well be here by the time of the next general election.
So in a way, they have to start to talk about things like a universal basic income for all those people leaving education, looking around and not finding the graduate entry-level jobs that they were expecting. And then there's the question, where does the money come from? And it just strikes me that the one thing that we have got in this country and in Western Europe that the American tech companies need is a market. So there is potential to persuade tech companies to pay enough tax to pick up some of the social consequences of what they're doing. But do you think, again, there's any kind of conversation starting about that?
Well, universal basic income, the idea of everyone being paid a sort of amount per month by the government, has been around for a little while. I'm a little bit sceptical of that because I believe that people get much more from work than just money. Of course, it's the primary reason that people go to work, but it's a sense of purpose, it's a sense of meaning, and a sense of camaraderie with colleagues. So I think that's really important, and we're going to have to potentially find new ways of humans getting those requirements and those things from work. And I think that is a huge challenge that's going to be there. I do think you're seeing a huge problem in the kind of graduate under 24 market at the moment. I mean, you have almost 1 million people not in education or in work at the moment. That is a huge problem. That's where you're seeing AI impact over the last year in particular, and also those single service jobs. So say a graphic designer, for example, if that is your one job, AI has been able to do a huge amount of that over the last year. So I think the government will have to think of innovative ways. We may have to see some kind of return to the Kickstart scheme that Rishi Sunak brought in when he was Chancellor during COVID, for example, which is where employers are paid to take people on for 6 months. It's hugely expensive and so on, but it is a massive problem that is coming.
And you're a political guy, so what about politics more generally? Because we hear lots of people protest angrily about populism, whether it's populism of the right or populism of the left. But if we have a generation for whom work is no longer likely to be their lifetime's purpose, you can see why they may not feel they've got no status, no involvement in the society generally, and they feel drawn to much more extreme solutions.
I think that's true. I also think it's a fascinating question how the job of a member of parliament will change in an AI world as well. So much of what an MP does is almost a router for their constituents around government, sending them to the right departments, etc., to get problems solved, etc. That could all be taken away by AI. So that's a sort of fascinating side question that I think Westminster should pay some consideration to. But I also think that we should be aware that new jobs will be created, and it's difficult to predict what those might be. But you could argue, for example, Microsoft came out with the Excel spreadsheet in the 90s. Now, in some ways, that could have automated the work of accountants, but actually we've got more accountants than we've ever had before. So more people will have access to lots of these different tools, and that will mean lots of new jobs being created as well. So I do feel there is a bit of an optimistic tone as well to this.
I can't let you go without very briefly asking you the same question I was asking the previous speaker. You've got a nephew or a niece who's really worried about the jobs market, leaving education and wondering what kind of thing to look for. What would your advice? What is the Jimmy Jobs advice?
Well, it's interesting because at the moment, over 50s are a booming demographic listening to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future. And my view is that is entirely people trying to help their children with what's coming next. And so I think one of the biggest things is learn how to use the AI tools. Like that is going to be the first instance for the next year or 18 months is learn how to use them. And that is a real opportunity for young people in some ways, because actually if you're coming into the workforce and you know how to use these things, you may almost be able to leapfrog the generation that went before you into being useful. So I think that's a real opportunity for them. But then there are also, growing sectors where there is more jobs being created. You look at energy, you look at defence. If we're going to increase defence spending from 2% to 5%, that's going to be a booming industry as well. So I think it's trying to think a little bit about those areas that might be growing over the next couple of decades.
Lots of good advice there. Jimmy McLoughlin, thank you very much for talking to LBC tonight.